Hey everyone, it's TB Shores. It is July the 18th, 2020. It's 8:08 p.m. I want to try to pick up where we left off. In the last two videos, we were talking about the ninth hour and how the Lord's temple had been destroyed, his physical body. Now we know that we looked at scripture that let us know that Jesus saw his body as the temple, and he spoke of it in terms of several times within the scriptures. We see how it was spoken that the destruction of this temple and how he would build it up in 3 days. And the scripture clearly said that he was referring to the temple of his body. So it's important that we understand that what happened when he died on the cross was the destruction of his temple, his physical body, and how that applies to this time frame of the 3 weeks of mourning, and how the Jews mourn every year for this period of 3 weeks for the temple, well, the two temples that were destroyed, both by fire. And they mourn the loss of this because they think it's has caused them to lose their, for lack of a better way to express it, their connection with the Lord and the way that they worship. And they don't even realize that when they crucified Jesus, that was a destruction of the temple that God had sent, because God was manifest in the flesh, and he had come amongst them, and they did not recognize the Messiah when he came. It's important that we understand all this and in what and how it applies to this 3 weeks of mourning and what it represents. Their grieving and mourning and their travail over the loss of these handmade temples, and how they didn't even recognize the Lord when he came. We spoke of the ninth hour, and it was about the 6th and the 9th hour, between the 6th and the 9th hour, that the 3 hours of darkness came. And when the 9th hour was at the 9th hour that Jesus gave up the ghost, when he left that body. It's important for us to understand, number one, that the crucifixion is about his temple was destroyed. Okay? And number two, that Jesus's time in the flesh was finished at the 9th hour on the cross. Okay? His temple was destroyed, and his time in the flesh was finished. And the reason it's important that we understand that is how it connects with the destruction of the temple, and how the Jews mourn over this, and how they did not even realize the significance of the true temple of God that they destroyed. Now, let's see. I'm trying to see what's the next thing I want to touch on here. Bear with me just a minute. Yes, how that when Jesus' time on the cross was finished, what he was speaking of about they're destroying the temple, their physical temple being destroyed, how it was a temple made by hands, and the temple that he would raise up would be a temple that was made without hands. It's about the spiritual house that we see spoken of in 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 5, where it's talking about build up a spiritual house, a holy priesthood. So that's what the Lord was setting in motion when his death on the cross happened and he went on to be resurrected. When he was resurrected, that changed the covenant. and it set things in motion for the building up of the kingdom, the new house, the spiritual house of God. Okay, now we need to look back at some things about this 3 weeks of mourning. Okay, it says, what is Tisha B'Av? Tisha B'Av is the 9th day of the month of Av, which is July 29th and 30th of this year. It is the saddest day of the Jewish calendar, on which they fast and pray. It is the culmination of the 3 weeks, a period of time during which they mark the destruction of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. Now they're talking about, of course, the temple made with hands. Now, this is viewed by the Jewish people as the saddest day on their calendar because of the destruction they had experienced over their history at the same time frame. Okay, it's important to remember that because we're going to talk about it again in just a minute. Let me back up to that again. When we understand that this, I need to re-mention, I think, that, let me pop over here, that this is the day of destruction where in history that they have experienced the devastating things that have come. It has been on the 9th of Av. But if you go back 3 weeks, which is Tammuz 17, that's when the mourning begins, their 3-week mourning period, because that's when the temple walls were breached and the enemy came in and the fighting broke out within the city. It's important to note that because we're going to talk about that later too, because what is being shown spiritually with that breaching of the wall lends understanding to this birthing of the kingdoms that is coming. So we look at this 3-week period, and we know that it ends on the 9th of Av, but as I pointed out in other videos, there is a 9-day period that begins on the 1st of Av, which is July 22nd, which also is a new moon that begins a 9 days of intense mourning that takes place leading up to this day of destruction that they have marked on their calendar. Now, all this is important. This 9 days of intense mourning, what this day of destruction represents, as in mainly the setting the temples on fire, the destruction of the temples, okay? There are some other things that have taken place within this 9 days of mourning that we may discuss later, that actually pertains to things outside of Jerusalem. But when we look at how they grieve over this, and we're going to look at, hold on just a minute, we're going to look at this video that lends more understanding to this grieving time and what significance the 9th of Av holds in the perception of the Jewish people. Okay, and oddly enough, the section I'm going to show you starts at 1 minute and 44 seconds, 1:44. Here we go. It says, thus begins 3 weeks of mourning. Now, the previous part of this video was talking about destructive events that have happened over the history of the Jewish people and how it all is part of their 3 weeks of mourning. But this says, thus begins the 3 weeks of mourning, leading up to the saddest day of the Jewish calendar. Now, we talked about that just a minute ago. This is viewed as their saddest day, which is right here, Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av. Okay, this is important right here. It says, may God grant that this day soon be converted to a holiday. May God grant that this day soon be converted to a holiday. Okay, this says that this day, the 9th of Av, they want it to be converted to a holiday. And look what they mean by that. With the arrival of Mashiach. Okay, this day is the day. This hit me like a smack in the face when I watched this video, because this hit me as the 9th of Av being the day that the Jewish people perceive the arrival of their Messiah. Because it's with the arrival of the Messiah, they anticipate the building of the third temple. Okay? That's what all this mourning about the temple is about, and how they want the Messiah to come so they can build their third temple. Now, we all know, those of us that are familiar with Bible prophecy, we understand what the third temple means in Bible prophecy, and we understand, most of us, understand that the arrival of the Mashiach in the Jewish people's eyes, in the eyes of Israel today, will mean them thinking that the Messiah has come, but it's a false Messiah, the Antichrist. Okay? So do you see the connection that's happening here? Can I say for certain that that's what's going to happen on this day? No, I cannot. But I can say this, I know what God is showing me. Now, just where it lands in God's time frame versus how the dates fall on our calendar, I can't say. But He's telling us this time it's here. I would not be surprised for it to happen on this day, because it is supposed to get the Jewish people's attention. That's the whole point of many of these end time events, because they have to recognize who the Messiah was. And when I say the whole point, one of those points being the infilling of the 144s, the first fruits. I'm getting a little ahead of myself, so let me back up a little bit. Now we're going to look at this one more time, okay? Because it's important that we understand what's being said with this video. It says, may God grant that this day soon be converted to a holiday with the arrival of Mashiach. And like I said, I looked at that as, oh my goodness, that's the day they anticipate the arrival of their Messiah. Okay, then whenever I run across this page, which is still on the chabad.org, and we're just going to cover this little phrase I've got highlighted because it backs up what the video said. It says, we can now understand the tradition that the Messiah is born on Tisha B'Av. From the collective birth contractions of the Jewish people will be born our own redemption. So, okay, they see all the travail, the trial, and the difficulty that they've gone through with each time that this date held a tragedy for them. They see that as travail, birth contractions that will bring forth the birthing of the Messiah, that will bring forth the Messiah, bring the Messiah to them on Tisha B'Av. That's what this is saying. We can now understand the tradition that the Messiah is born on Tisha B'Av. From the collective birth contractions of the Jewish people will be born our own redemption. So they see that every tragedy that's happened in this time frame, the Av ninth, anything connected to the 3 weeks of mourning, they see it as collective birth contractions that will lead up to the birthing, the bringing forth of their Messiah on that same date, Tisha B'Av. So I hope you can see what I feel the Lord is showing me here, because it is about um, understanding what is anticipated by the Jewish people, because we know that the tribulation plays a huge part in bringing the Jewish people back to the Lord. But it also, what is happening, plays a huge part with this time frame affecting the 144s, the first fruits, and setting into motion the building of the kingdom. Let me see if there's anything else I want to. We'll get into that on the next video. I'm going to stop here with this. I hope you can understand what I'm saying, the significance of the 9th of Av, and how they even view this as a birthing. It's this contractions that will bring forth their Messiah on Tisha B'Av. And of course, we are looking for the birthing. We know that we're bringing forth, what's happening is bringing forth the two kingdoms. They are about to be birthed at the same time. And because of that, we will see the birthing of the man-child that is spoken of in Revelation. And of course, that's the first fruits, the 144. And all this birthing is connected. We see a connection with that when I get into it, with understanding some spiritual things about this breaching of the wall and the invasion on the fighting and the trial that went on within that 3 weeks. They see this as birth contractions, okay? So what I'm trying to say, to put it in a nutshell, is that this 3 weeks of mourning is a travail, a time of travail, building up to the 9th of Av, which is also the 9 days of mourning, which you've got to keep in mind. 9 represents the month of birth, okay? A baby is in the womb for 9 months. All of this connects with the number 9. 9 being the 9th hour, being when Jesus' temple was destroyed, and they mourned the destruction of the handmade temple, and Jesus' time in the flesh being finished. And all this connects. I hope you can understand what I'm saying. I'm going to cut this off and hopefully be able to tie some of this stuff in a little better. And we'll see you in the next video. I love y'all. Bye-bye.